The little girl was not lost. That was the first thing Declan noticed. She was standing completely still in the middle of the departure hall at Calgary International Airport, one hand loosely holding the strap of a small backpack shaped like a fox, and she was watching him work. He had been crouched under Gate 34's auxiliary power panel for the better part of 40 minutes. A ground crew malfunction, nothing dramatic, just a relay that had been misfiring since Tuesday and that 3 other technicians had flagged and forgotten. Declan Walsh did not forget things like that. He had come in on his day off, which was a Thursday, because the relay was going to fail completely by the weekend, and when it did, it would ground a morning departure, and nobody else seemed to understand that. He became aware of the girl slowly, the way you become aware of a sound that has been there longer than you realized. He looked up. She was maybe 6, maybe 7. Dark braids, a purple jacket with a zipper that was missing its pull. She was watching his hands. "What are you fixing?" she asked. "A relay," he said. "What's a relay?" "It tells electricity where to go." She thought about this. "Like a traffic cop?" Declan paused. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "Exactly like a traffic cop." She seemed satisfied. She didn't leave. He went back to work, and she stayed there, watching with the particular focused patience of a child who has decided something is interesting and is going to see it through. It was another few minutes before he thought to ask, "Where's your mom or your dad?" "My dad's getting coffee," she said. "Gate 32, that's 2 gates over, I know." She pointed at his hands. "You know which wire is which without looking." Declan glanced down. She was right. He'd been routing by feel. 22 years in aviation maintenance did that to you. Put the schematics into your fingertips. "Been doing it a long time," he said. "My dad fixes things too," she said. "He fixed our dishwasher. Mom used to say he was the only person she trusted to fix things." The past tense landed quietly. Declan did not react. He had learned not to react to past tenses because the person who used them was usually still deciding whether they wanted to talk about it. "Your dad sounds like a good man," he said. "He is." She paused. "Mom's gone now, but he's still good." Declan set down the small wrench he'd been holding. He looked at her properly then, this little girl who said things plainly, the way children did when nobody had taught them yet that plain things were supposed to be softened. Her eyes were steady. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She was just telling him a fact. "What's your name?" he asked. "Poppy," she said. "Poppy Sinclair. I'm Declan." She extended one small hand and he shook it, grease-stained as he was, and she did not flinch. He thought about her on the drive home. That wasn't unusual. He thought about a lot of things on the drive home, because the drive home was the part of the day when he was no longer solving something, and his brain didn't know what to do with the quiet. He thought about the relay. He thought about whether he'd remembered to sign the service log. He thought about what his daughter Nessa would want for dinner, and whether there was enough of the chicken left, and whether she'd had a good day. He did not think about Poppy Sinclair specifically, not in any way he noticed. But somewhere in his chest, something had shifted a few millimeters, the way a bolt does just before it finds its thread. Nessa was 9, which meant she was simultaneously very grown-up and not grown-up at all, depending on the hour. When he got home, she was at the kitchen table doing homework with the focused displeasure of someone who has been betrayed by mathematics. She didn't look up when he came in. "There's no more milk," she said. "Good evening to you too." "Evening. There's no milk." I checked. He dropped his bag, washed his hands at the sink. The kitchen was small and particular, the way kitchens get after years of just 2 people in them. Nessa's drawings were stuck to the fridge with magnets shaped like Canadian provinces. New Brunswick was holding up a drawing of a dog they did not own. He had been thinking about getting a dog. "How was school?" he asked. "Mathieu Bernier said my drawing of a horse looked like a table. Did it?" She looked up, a little bit. He smiled. She went back to her homework. This was how evenings went, usually. He cooked something. She complained about it mildly and then ate most of it. He helped with whatever homework had defeated her by 7 o'clock. She was asleep by 9. He stayed up too late looking at technical manuals or watching old hockey games, and then he was tired in the morning, and the whole thing began again. It was not a glamorous life, but it was his and Nessa's, and it held. He ran into Poppy Sinclair again 11 days later. He was in the airport on a regular shift when he heard someone say his name, not his last name, the way colleagues said it, but Declan, the full word, said by a child's voice. He turned and there she was, purple jacket, fox backpack, same braids, standing next to a man who was clearly her father, in the way that some parents are clearly that, unmistakably, in the shape of the jaw and the set of the eyes. The man was tall, somewhere in his early 40s, with the particular look of someone who had been handsome once, and was still handsome now, but didn't think about it. He was holding 2 boarding passes and looking at Declan with an expression caught between recognition and uncertainty. She said she met a mechanic, the man said. Airport maintenance, technically, Declan said. Declan Walsh, Brendan Whitmore. The man shook his hand. His grip was firm, without being effortful. She talked about you. Said you fixed electricity like a traffic cop. She came up with that. I just agreed. Poppy had already moved to stand next to Declan, examining the ID badge on his jacket. You have a different badge today, she said. Different access level. I'm in the terminal today, not the gate. Why? Different job. You have different jobs. Lots of them. Whatever needs fixing. Brendan Whitmore was watching his daughter. He was watching her the way Declan recognized, that particular quality of attention a single parent develops, always monitoring, always half-listening even in conversation, some part of you tracking the small human who is the reason everything matters. Declan had the same attention himself. He could feel Nessa in his peripheral vision even when she wasn't there. We're heading to Toronto, Brendan said. My sister's wedding. Congratulations to her. I'll pass it along. She'll appreciate hearing it from a stranger. He said it dryly, and Declan recognized the dry too. It was the humor of someone who had learned not to expect much and found that funnier than the alternative. They talked for 4 minutes, maybe 5, while Poppy investigated a departures board and asked questions about what delayed meant and why planes were delayed and whether it was always the weather or sometimes other reasons. Declan explained about mechanical holds and air traffic control and de-icing protocols. She listened to all of it. When they left, Brendan calling her name, Poppy trotting after him with the fox backpack bouncing, she turned once and waved. He didn't think much of it. Then she turned again at the edge of the corridor and said, "You smell like my dad after he fixes things." She said it simply, informatively, as if it were useful data for him to have. Then she was gone around the corner. Declan stood there for a moment. The departures board flicked over. A gate number changed. He went back to work. He probably would have let the whole thing settle into the category of pleasant coincidence. One of those small, warm moments that happen in airports, which are, despite everything, places where people are going somewhere, and going somewhere produces a particular temporary openness in people. He filed Poppy Sinclair away in that drawer. Then, a month later, a woman came to the maintenance office looking for him. The woman was not Brendan Whitmore. That was the first thing Declan established, because she did not look anything like Brendan. She was taller than Poppy's father, broader in the shoulders, dressed in a coat that cost more than Declan's truck. And she walked into the maintenance office with the specific purpose of someone who did not normally come to maintenance offices, and found the experience clarifying. Her name, he would learn in approximately 90 seconds, was Margaret Whitmore. She was Brendan's sister, and she was not there to thank him for anything. "Are you Declan Walsh?" she said. There were 3 other technicians in the break room. They all looked up. "Yes," he said. "You spoke to my niece, Poppy, multiple times." He set down his coffee. "Twice," he said. "Both times in the terminal, both times with her father nearby. Poppy's father is my brother. He mentioned you." "All right." "He mentioned you favorably," she said, as if this were something she found puzzling. "Poppy has apparently talked about you on multiple occasions since their last trip. She told her teacher about the traffic cop explanation. She told her grandmother. A pause. I'd like to understand who you are. Declan looked at her. She was not hostile, exactly. She was assessing. He recognized the difference because he spent a lot of time assessing things himself. Systems, parts, the sound a component made when it was about to fail. She was doing the same thing to him. I'm a maintenance supervisor, he said. I've worked at YYC for 18 years. I'm local. I live in ranchlands. I have a daughter, Nessa. She's 9. My wife passed 4 years ago. Cardiac arrhythmia, sudden. He paused. I'm not sure what else would be relevant. Margaret Whitmore looked at him for a long moment. Why did you spend time talking to a child you didn't know? She came up to me while I was working and started asking questions. I answered them. That was the extent of it. And the second time? She recognized me and said hello. Her father was standing 2 feet away the whole time. You can pull the terminal footage if that's useful to you. She absorbed this. She had the stillness of someone who made significant decisions regularly and had developed a physical discipline around it. Brendan doesn't have a lot of people in his corner, she said finally. When our mother was sick, and then when Claire died, he handled most of it quietly. He doesn't ask for much. Poppy doesn't attach easily to people. Another pause. She talks about you. I noticed. That's unusual for her. It's been unusual since Claire. Margaret Whitmore looked away briefly at the wall of the maintenance office, which had a safety compliance chart on it and a printed email about the parking policy. I'm getting married in 6 weeks. The wedding was in Toronto. Brendan was there with Poppy. He seemed lighter than he'd been. I was curious. Declan waited. He said you talked to Poppy like she was a person worth talking to, she said. He said she told him you smelled like him after work, after fixing things. She looked back at Declan. She hasn't said that about anyone before. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. I'm not trying to threaten you, Margaret Whitmore said, with the tone of someone who is acknowledging that they have, in fact, been at least mildly threatening. I'm trying to understand the situation. Brendan doesn't. He's careful about Poppy. He doesn't introduce her to people. He doesn't bring anyone into their life. I haven't introduced myself to anything, Declan said. I work here. She walked up to me. I know. A long pause. That's what makes it interesting. She left him a card. He put it on the edge of his locker and didn't know what to do with it. Brendan Whitmore called on a Sunday evening. Declan was in the garage, which was where he went when Nessa was at her grandmother's, and the house got too quiet. He was rebuilding a carburetor for no practical reason, except that it was satisfying, and the call came through on the speakerphone. He kept on the workbench. My sister told me she came to see you, Brendan said by way of opening. She did. I'm sorry about that. She does things like that, She investigates situations. A pause. I should have told her it wasn't necessary. She didn't bother me. She interrogated you. She asked reasonable questions, Declan said, given what she knew. A short silence on the line. Outside, the neighbor's kid was shooting a basketball in the driveway. The regular percussion of it, regular as a metronome. Poppy asked if you had a daughter, Brendan said. I didn't know. I told her I'd find out. I do, Nessa. She's 9. Poppy's 6. She turns 7 in March. He paused again. This is a strange conversation to be having. It is, Declan agreed. I don't typically call strangers on Sunday. I don't typically get called. Something in the line shifted slightly. Not warmth exactly, but the first degree of ease. The way two people find when they've established that they both understand a thing is slightly absurd and are willing to proceed anyway. Poppy wanted to know if you had a daughter, Brendan said. Because she wants to know if your daughter knows how to do braids. Her grandmother does them now, but she goes back and forth between Cochrane, and Poppy wants to learn herself but can't do the back. Declan set down the part he'd been holding. Nessa can do braids, he said. She learned from YouTube. She practices on herself. Right, Brendan said. She'd probably teach her, Declan said. If that's something that would be useful. Another pause. I'm not asking for that, Brendan said quickly. I was telling you what Poppy asked. I wasn't necessarily. I know, Declan said. But the offer's there. The basketball continued its rhythm outside. The carburetor sat half open on the workbench. She said you explained about delayed flights, Brendan said. Air traffic control. De-icing, she asked. She talked about it for a week. Her teacher wrote it in her communication book. Poppy gave a detailed explanation of airport operations during sharing time. He exhaled slightly, not quite a laugh but the shape of one. She does that. She gets interested in things and then she wants to understand the whole system. She's smart, Declan said. She is, Brendan agreed. And then, quietly, in a different register, she's really smart. Claire used to say she was going to be an engineer. Or a detective. Probably both. He let that sit for a second. She gets it from her mother. He'd learned that lesson too 4 years ago in all the conversations with well-meaning people who rushed to fill silences about Mara as if the quiet were a problem to be solved. Sometimes the quiet was just the space where someone real used to be. I'm sorry about Claire, he said eventually. I'm sorry about your wife, Brendan said. That was all. It was enough. They met in person, by arrangement this time, at a coffee shop in Kensington on a Saturday in late November. Brendan brought Poppy. Declan brought Nessa. He had not told Nessa much. He'd said he'd met a man at work whose daughter was a bit younger, and did she want to come for coffee, and maybe a muffin. And she'd looked at him with the evaluating look she'd developed at roughly age 7 and said, "Is this about making friends?" And he'd said it might be, a little, and she'd said okay, in a tone that suggested she was doing him a favor. Poppy recognized him immediately. She looked at Nessa with a solemn curiosity. "Can you really do braids?" Poppy asked. "French braids, Dutch braids, fishtail braids," Nessa said. "Fishtail takes the longest. Can you do it on someone else or just yourself?" "Both," Nessa said. "Do you want me to show you?" Poppy looked at her father. He gave a small nod. Nessa produced an elastic from her jacket pocket. She kept elastics in her jacket pocket, and within 3 minutes she was sitting behind Poppy on the bench with her hands in her hair, explaining each step in the patient, slightly superior manner of someone sharing expertise. Brendan watched this. He was holding a coffee cup with both hands and watching his daughter's face, which had gone very still the way Pa Cow's face went still when she was paying close attention to something. "She's been wanting that for months," he said quietly. Declan nodded. He didn't say anything. "I can't do hair," Brendan said. "I've watched videos. I've practiced on a doll that she told me was not actually useful because it doesn't have the right to hair. I've paid for a braiding appointment in Cochrane every time her grandmother isn't in town." He paused. "It's not about the braids, obviously." "No," Declan said. She wants someone. A woman. Or the idea of one. She's handling everything, Poppy is. She's more together than I am, most days. But sometimes she just wants." He stopped. "Someone to know how to do the braids," Declan said. From that bench, Poppy's voice. "Like this. Pull this piece, then this piece. No, like, yeah. Yeah, that's it." From Nessa. "You've got it. It took me 3 weeks to get this part. I'm a fast learner," Poppy said, not bragging, just informing. Declan looked at Brendan. Brendan looked at Declan. Something passed between them, the way things do between two people who are navigating the same general territory by different roads. The territory of raising children through loss, of the things you can learn to do and the things you can't, of the surprising sources of help that appear in airport terminals and coffee shops in November. "She said you smell like grease and metal," Brendan said. "After work, she said you smell like me after I've been in the shop. I work on machines," Declan said. "Same, vehicle fabrication, custom builds." He glanced at his hands, which had the same quality as Declan's, the hands of someone who really used them on things that mattered. She said it made her feel safe. The smell. He shook his head slightly. "She said it right away, apparently, when you were fixing the relay." Declan remembered. He'd gone back to work and not thought about it, and then thought about it for weeks. "Kids know things," he said. "She knew you before I did," Brendan said. "She has a good track record, actually. She told me about Claire when we started dating. Poppy was 4. She walked up to Claire and said, 'You have kind eyes.' Poppy had met 20 people in the previous month. She only said that to Claire. He looked at his coffee. She didn't talk to anyone new after. For almost 2 years, she just pulled in. Her grief counselor said it was normal, the withdrawal, that she'd reach back out when she was ready. He looked across at Poppy, who was now being walked through the mechanics of a fishtail by Nessa, with great seriousness. She reached toward you first, at the airport. Declan had not known that. He felt the weight of it settle somewhere in his sternum. Not pressure, just weight. The particular weight of being trusted with something true. The trouble started, as trouble in these situations often does, through someone who had been watching from a distance and had decided that watching was no longer sufficient. Her name was Dorothy Haverstock, and she was Brendan's former mother-in-law. She had been involved, or had kept herself involved, since Claire's death. Not always helpfully. She sent cards and left phone messages. She appeared at Papa's school events. This was not unusual, and Brendan had not discouraged it, because Poppy had loved her grandmother Haverstock, and Claire had loved her mother, and grief was not a competition. He tried to be fair. He had been trying to be fair for 4 years. But Dorothy Haverstock did not think he was managing well. She had said so, in various ways, to various people, over those 4 years, his sister, his mother, his daughter's school counselor. She felt that Poppy needed more stability. She felt that Brendan's schedule was too demanding. She felt that a man who worked with his hands should not be raising a child alone. She had not, to Declan's knowledge, involved herself in his situation. But Dorothy Haverstock had connections, and one of those connections was a woman named Susan Ellard, who worked in airport administration, and who had noticed, apparently, that a maintenance supervisor had been talking to a young child in the terminal on 2 separate occasions over the course of a month. Susan Ellard had put this in an email to her supervisor. Her supervisor had flagged it to HR. HR had called Declan into an office on a Wednesday afternoon. He arrived at the meeting with his 18-year employment record and his service log and the terminal footage timestamps he had requested the night before, when the union rep had called to tell him what was happening. He sat across from 2 HR representatives whose names he was told and immediately stopped prioritizing, and from his direct supervisor, Gordon Pack, who had the expression of a man attending something he found both necessary and deeply unfortunate. "We've received a concern," the first HR representative said, "regarding interactions with a minor in the terminal." "I've pulled the footage," Declan said. He put a USB drive on the table. Both interactions. Combined duration approximately 9 minutes. The child's father was present for the majority of both interactions and can be clearly identified in the footage. Silence. "I also have a signed statement from Brendan Whitmore," he said, "who is Poppy Whitmore's father. He prepared it last night." He placed that on the table too. The 2 HR representatives looked at each other. "You came prepared," the second one said. "I've worked here for 18 years, Declan said. "I understand what's being asked and I understand why it's being asked, and I'm not confused about the seriousness of it. I'm also telling you plainly that I did nothing wrong. If you have questions beyond what I've provided, I'm happy to answer them." Gordon Pack cleared his throat. "Declan has an exemplary record," he said. "I want that noted." The first HR representative looked at the USB drive. "We'll review the footage." "Please do," Declan said. He was home by 4 o'clock. He made Nessa dinner. He did not tell her what had happened, because she was 9 and she would worry, and the worry would be about him, not about her, and she did enough of that already. He went into the garage at 8 o'clock and reassembled a brake caliper he hadn't needed to touch for any reason, and then sat on an overturned crate and thought about what it cost, sometimes, to be the kind of person who fixed things quietly and didn't make noise about it. He thought about Mara. He thought about the way Nessa still sometimes stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him cook, as if verifying that he was still there. He thought about Poppy Whitmore saying, "You smell like my dad," and the way she'd said it, not as a compliment, not as a cute thing a child says, but as information, as data, as one small person's honest assessment of a thing she recognized. He put that in the category of things he did not want to lose access to. Brendan called the next morning. "Margaret told me," he said immediately, "about the HR thing." "Margaret has sources," Declan said. "Margaret has everyone's number, which is different." A pause. "I'm sorry. I think I know where it came from, and I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for something you didn't do. Dorothy Haverstock has been looking for a reason to." He stopped, started again. "She thinks I'm not coping. She thinks Poppy would be better off with more of her involvement. She's been angling for that for 2 years. When she heard about you, she heard about me. Poppy mentioned you to her during a video call. She's 6. She talks about things that are interesting to her. She said there was a man at the airport who knew how electricity worked and who smelled like her dad." A short exhale. "Dorothy apparently took that seriously as. I don't know what she took it as. She has a contact in the airport. I didn't know about the contact." Declan was quiet for a moment. "The footage will clear it," he said. "I brought it in." "Of course you did." Brendan said this with a particular tone, not surprise, but something adjacent to respect that had solidified. "You prepared before they could. I spent 22 years working on things that, if you didn't prepare before they failed, were going to take down an aircraft," Declan said. "It's a habit." Brendan was quiet on his end of the line, the particular quiet of someone recategorizing information. "I want to explain something to you," Brendan said. "About Poppy. About why she said what she said, the smell thing." He paused. "Claire used to wait up for me after late nights in the shop. Poppy would be in bed but not asleep. You know how they do that. They go to bed and they lie there and they listen. She could hear Claire and me in the kitchen. She told her grief counselor that what she remembered most, in the first year, was coming downstairs sometimes and finding Claire and me in the kitchen after my late shifts, and that I smelled like grease and metal and warmth, and Claire would pour me a tea, and they'd both sit with me while I decompressed." He stopped. "She called it Dad smell. The counselor wrote it in the notes. She said it meant safety." Declan stood in his kitchen, one hand on the counter. "She hasn't called anything dad smell in 4 years, Brendan said. "Not until she met you. The HR review took 5 days. On the 6th day, Gordon Pack came by the maintenance bay and told Declan that the complaint had been reviewed, found to be without merit, and formally closed. He said this quietly, between 2 other things he was doing, so that it didn't make a production. Declan appreciated that. What he did not expect was the email that came to his personal account that afternoon, from an address he didn't recognize, which turned out to belong to Dorothy Haverstock. She had written him 4 paragraphs. He read them twice. The first 2 paragraphs were defensive, about her concerns, about Poppy, about what she felt were her rights as a grandmother. Standard, he understood it. The 3rd paragraph surprised him. She wrote, "Poppy told Brendan this week that she wants to grow up and learn to fix planes, and that she wants her friend Nessa to teach her braids for a school photo. I have not heard her plan her future in 2 years. I don't know who you are, Mr. Walsh, but whatever you've done, she is planning her future again." The 4th paragraph was an apology. It was a halting apology, an apology that hadn't fully made peace with itself yet, but it was real. He drafted a response, deleted it, tried again. Wrote 4 lines. Said he appreciated her saying so. Said Poppy was a remarkable kid and her father was clearly doing something right. Said he hoped they could all be people worth knowing to her as she grew. He sent it. He didn't know if it was enough. He thought probably it wasn't, and then he thought that probably enough wasn't available yet, and that the work was incremental. The way all important repairs were. Piece by piece, relay by relay, until the system found its current again and electricity knew where to go. On a Saturday in December, he and Brendan took the girls to the Calgary Zoo for the afternoon. This was not a date. He would have been unable to articulate clearly what it was if asked. It was 2 men and their daughters looking at animals on a cold afternoon. Because Poppy had announced at some point that she wanted to see the penguins before Christmas. And Nessa had said she'd never properly seen the new Arctic section, and it had seemed reasonable. They walked through the exhibits. Poppy and Nessa went ahead, which happened naturally. Nessa was taller and longer-legged but slowed her pace without being asked, and Poppy did not run ahead as much as she typically might. And after about 20 minutes they were walking side by side with a regularity that felt established rather than new. Declan and Brendan walked behind them. "She slept all the way through Wednesday night," Brendan said. "She hasn't done that in months." "Nessa's the same when she's got a project," Declan said. "She wore herself out learning the fishtail and slept like it was a medical event." Brendan smiled. It was the first time Declan had seen him do that fully, not the near law or the exhale, but an actual smile. It changed his face considerably. "I don't have a lot of people who get it," Brendan said after a while. They were at the penguin exhibit. The girls had pressed up to the glass, the day-to-day, the math of it. What you give up, what you keep, what the giver is what you need. Most people who try to help either take over or disappear. "Yeah," Declan said. "Margaret helps. She does. But she doesn't have kids, she doesn't." He stopped. "She thinks logistics. She fixes logistics. You fix." He seemed to be searching for the word. "Whatever's actually broken," Declan said. Brendan looked at him. "Yeah," he said. At the glass, Poppy put her hand up flat, and one of the penguins waddled over and pressed its beak against the other side, almost against her palm. She went completely still. Her face opened up in a way that was whole and unguarded. "Dad," she said. She didn't look away from the penguin. "Did you see?" "I see," Brendan said. "Dad," still not looking away. "Can Declan and Nessa come back for Christmas Eve?" Brendan looked at Declan. Declan looked at Brendan. Nessa, who had been watching the same penguin, said, without turning her head, "You should say yes. She's going to ask 11 more times either way." Brendan exhaled. This time it was a laugh, a real one. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, they can come." Poppy nodded once, satisfied. She had confirmed the data. The question had been answered. She went back to the penguin, which was still there on the other side of the glass, patient as anything, waiting to be looked at. Declan put his hands in his jacket pockets. Outside the windows of the penguin house, the December sky was the particular gray of Alberta just before it snows, the kind of gray that was not threatening but settling, the sky getting ready, making room for what came next.